Nikolai came into the house I shared with a dozen other employees of Bureau 39. I could see the bulge of the gargantuan black pistol he always kept holstered under his suit jacket. He rubbed one call-used hand over his freshly shaved head before taking a deep drag of his cigarette and flicking the ashes all over the wooden floor. He smoked Yves Saint Laurent, a brand of cigarettes that Kim Jong-un also loved. They cost $60 a pack, the equivalent of a month's wages for most North Koreans. We lived in very cramped conditions. I slept on the floor on a blanket, feeling the hardwood like a bed of nails under my back. Computers and tables took up the entire front room of the two-bedroom house. Nikolai pointed at me and my brother with his half-smoked cigarette. He narrowed his cold blue eyes at us. They looked like the eyes of a Siberian husky, the faded color of melting glaciers. "Moon," he said, nodding at me, "take your brother Shin and come with me." Shin pushed his large, black-framed glasses up his bulbous nose. His greasy black bowl cut flew around his head as he turned away from his laptop, jumping up without a word. I got up just as fast. We were never allowed to leave the embassy here in Cambodia. We were kept as virtual prisoners. Everyone in Bureau 39 was at the top of their field. We had hackers, programmers of ransomware, manufacturers of methamphetamine and fentanyl, and much darker trades than that. Throughout its history, the Bureau had sold chemical weapons, biological agents, nuclear secrets, torture and murder. To get the cash back to North Korea, we would use diplomats from the embassies, since they had immunity and couldn't be stopped even if caught carrying millions of dollars. In North Korea, the average person makes about $1,000 a year. Most have no electricity in their homes. People often defecate in the bushes or in buckets, and all farm labor is done with animals and antique plows. Going to the rural areas is like taking a time machine back to the 1700s in a way. So people signed up for Bureau 39 or any other elite agency by the droves in order to escape these intolerable living conditions. The government had the pick of the litter. To get into the capital city of Pyongyang, a citizen of North Korea needs a special permit. Only the elites are allowed to step foot inside city limits. And yet, even here, electricity often only runs for 2 or 3 hours a day. According to North Korean law, if a building has 10 stories or less, it doesn't need an elevator. Not that an elevator matters much in a country with barely any electricity for civilian purposes. But this means starving people are regularly climbing up dozens of stories in buildings with no electricity, central heating, or air conditioning. So even though Bureau 39 agents are kept like prisoners in the embassy, we still have luxuries the average North Korean can only dream of. Perhaps 30 or 40% of their entire North Korean GDP goes to nuclear and intercontinental missile research. Even in the military, the soldiers regularly eat grass, snakes, rats and other pests. North Koreans who have escaped to South Korea often have advanced parasite infections from eating such garbage their entire lives. The South Koreans recently found 35 feet of tapeworm in a single starving North Korean soldier who drove and then ran across the DMZ, getting shot multiple times in the process. So perhaps you understand why I preferred to work in Bureau 39 at a foreign embassy rather than stay in North Korea. Bureau 39 exists for only one reason: to give hundreds of millions of dollars to Kim Jong-un for mansions, cars, women, luxury cigarettes, exotic foods, and whatever else he desires. It is a slush fund for the great leader. While the rest of his people starve and live in freezing poverty without medicine or hope, Kim Jong-un lives like a god among men. At each of his many mansions, he has harems waiting for him filled with all the most beautiful girls in the country, taken out of schools by faceless agents of the Stalinist kingdom. Nikolai walked out into the tropical Cambodian sun. I felt blinded for a minute. I saw Shin shielding his eyes and blinking rapidly, as if he had just woken up from a long nightmare. "Please enter your password," the female robotic voice said in a tone so cool it reminded me of ice cream on a scorching day. "The alarm will sound in 5 seconds." Sweating heavily in the heat, Nikolai straightened his collar and began pressing a series of numbers. Once he realized I was watching, he swore at me and tried to cover the pad with his other hand, but I had seen the code, 2023. It was just the year. I repressed an urge to laugh. "Come on, scumbags," Nikolai said, taking his designer sunglasses out of his front suit pocket. "We have a meeting to attend. I'll explain on the way." He unlocked the Mercedes-Benz with the North Korean diplomatic plates on it and we got in. The car still felt cold from the air conditioning. The smell of Nikolai's overpriced cigarettes and even more expensive cologne hung in the air. I got in the passenger seat and Shin got in the back. We drove out through the open gate. Once the car had passed the end of the private drive, sensors automatically caused the gate to swing shut, locking the other North Korean prisoners inside, including my wife. We drove past the Buddhist temples and modern skyscrapers of the Cambodian skyline, a combination of ancient stone and gleaming glass. Nikolai lit up a cigarette and, without looking at me, started speaking, as if to himself. "We have a deal, bigger than any we have had in a long time," he said, staring ahead at the heavy traffic of tuk-tuks, taxis, farm trucks and cars. He swore as he checked his watch. "A group is willing to pay handsomely for the serum." I looked up sharply at those words. "The serum is not ready," I protested. Shin stayed silent in the back. I spun to see his expression. His glasses magnified his wide, shocked eyes to owlish proportions. Nikolai swatted his hand at my comment, as if shooing away an imaginary fly. "Haven't human subjects responded to the effects of the serum?" he asked, his tone turning icy. "You have had over 3 years and tens of millions of dollars to experiment. I know you two are some of the best biologists from the entire country of North Korea. Now, are you telling me that you have made no human progress?" "Of course not," I protested, "but we still have some kinks to work out. It has most of the properties that the Supreme Leader requested. It's just that some subjects have different cellular membranes, and it can lead to quite horrifying reactions." Nikolai laughed, a deep, booming laugh that cut off my protestations. I don't give a shit about side effects. We are selling the serum right now, today. If not, you can consider your experiment over. We have a group, let's say, who is willing to pay $100 million for a single crate of it. My jaw dropped. And what will happen to our project if we sell some of the serum? Shin asked, speaking up in his nasally voice for the first time. Project Wailing Banshee is not yet complete. We need more time. Nikolai turned to us, grinning like a hyena, his faded killer's eyes sparkling with glee. If you sell the serum to our good friends, Nikolai whispered in a low, psychopathic voice, your funding will be guaranteed for the next 2 years. The serum doesn't have to be perfect, it just needs to work. I sighed. Clearly, I had no real choice in the matter. I turned to Nikolai and gave a brisk nod. I saw Shin do the same. Good. I'll have a panel van bring it over to our meeting area now. These men we're dealing with might have some questions for you. Just answer them and let's get out of there. No problems, right? Right, Shin and I said together in unison. An icy wave of dread ran down my back, a premonition of things to come. We arrived at the warehouse at the edge of the city at dusk. The sky glowed a bloody red, reflecting off Nikolai's dark sunglasses. I saw the black panel van following close behind us with some more of Nikolai's armed goons sitting in the front. An intercom buzzer stood at the side of the garage door. Nikolai pressed it. After a few moments, a voice boomed on the other end, slightly obscured by static. Who is it? A man with an Arabic accent asked brusquely. You know who it is. Open up, Nikolai said. The door rolled up slowly, revealing only a curtain of shadows. We drove in and got out. I heard my shoes clicking against the concrete floor. The place looked abandoned. An open floor stretched out for hundreds of feet in every direction. From the office door in the back, a few men dressed in all black with balaclavas on their heads walked out. I saw they all had automatic rifles slung around their shoulders. A small boy in the same attire followed closely behind the group. Nikolai's two goons got out of the black panel van. I saw them reach under their seats and pull out micro Uzis. The tension in the air felt electric. No one said anything for a long moment as we surveyed each other across the dark no man's land between us. I'm glad to see you made it, Nikolai called out, his voice echoing off the concrete walls. I jumped. Next to me, Shin looked down at the ground, nervously chewing on his lip. Did you bring it? The leading man asked as they strode purposefully towards us. Where is the serum? Hang on, Nikolai said, giving them a crooked half-smile. I need to see the money first. He motioned with his head to his soldiers. They raised their Uzis. The leading man called out something in Arabic, and more black-clad soldiers came out of the back office, dragging dozens of heavy black bags. Nikolai and his goons walked quickly forward. I followed close behind, taking Shin's arm and pulling him along. Nikolai unzipped one bag. I saw it stuffed to the brim with stacks of $100 bills. The next bag over was filled with euros, and the third with gold and diamonds. I had never seen so much money in a single place in my entire life. He kept going through each one in turn, and I saw more precious stones, all sorts of gold bars, Canadian dollars, Japanese yen, and some other currencies with Arabic writing I didn't recognize. Nikolai grunted. "Can't you guys ever just give us all dollars or euros? Do you have any idea how long it's going to take me to count this? And what am I supposed to do with all these diamonds? Are they marked with lasers?" Nikolai asked. Their leader shook his head furiously. Nikolai sighed. "Go get the serum." He motioned to his goons. They practically ran to the van, desperate to get this deal over with and take their share of the profits. Nikolai's goons pulled out a small crate, only a foot across. I heard the jingling of many shatterproof vials stacked carefully inside. It was over 90% of our entire stockpile of serum, the fruit of many sleepless nights and many dead test subjects. The leader called out to the little boy in Arabic. He grabbed the crate of serum, cracking the lid off with a crowbar. He looked down excitedly at the containers laid out in front of him. I saw the leader pull one of the vials out and put it up to his eye. The liquid shone a robin's egg blue in the headlights of the cars. It sparkled as he turned it, as if with thousands of pieces of glitter. The leader gave a short prayer in Arabic, his face splitting into a grin. He pulled out a syringe and called the boy with the balaclava over. "Hey, you should wait until we leave too," Nikolai protested, but the leader waved him off. Without a moment of hesitation, he filled the syringe with the serum, raised the boy's sleeve and injected it into his arm. He spoke a few words in Arabic, and the boy responded, nodding, still smiling. Then his face began to change. The boy's eyes widened, his mouth opening in a silent scream. His hands clenched into fists, the fingernails biting deep grooves into his skin. Blood trickled down onto the floor. He started to turn blue, falling down on his back with a thud and a whoosh of air, seizing and kicking. The men in the balaclavas started shouting at us, raising their guns. I put my hands up. "Wait!" I cried, and surprisingly, they did. Only the boys' choking, gurgling cries broke the silence. The leader looked at me expectantly. "The transformation takes a minute. This is expected." The leader nodded, looking back at his men and raising his finger. They lowered their rifles. Nikolai wiped a heavy trickle of sweat out of his eyes. His gaze flitted from me to the boy and back again, like some sort of deadly metronome. I knew if the boy died, I would die also. The boy had gone silent, his lips turning blue, his pupils dilating. He gave one last choking death rattle and went still. I checked my watch, raising a finger like I had seen the leader do. 10 seconds, I said. The room had gone deathly silent. All I could hear was the frantic thudding of my heart within its cage of bones. 5 seconds. I counted down, praying to a god I didn't believe in for this to work. The boy jerked, taking a deep breath. His eyelids fluttered open. I saw his eyes had turned pure white. He grinned, showing off the many twisted, vampiric teeth jutting out of his blackened gums. With a hiss, he pushed himself off the ground, flying through the air and landing on his feet 10 feet away. "So thirsty," the boy growled in a demonic voice. His lifeless eyes flitted towards one of Nikolai's goons. In a blur, he jumped across the room and landed on the hulking figure. The man tried to fire his Uzi at the boy, but the boy swatted it out of his hand without the slightest indication of effort. Hanging off the man's chest like some giant tick, the boy grinned down at him and then bit deeply into his neck. A torrent of bright red blood rushed out, soaking into the man's suit. I could hear the boy's throat working as he drank furiously, sucking each precious gulp of blood with fluttering eyelids. "Kill him!" Nikolai screamed. Automatic rifle fire rang out from all around me. I couldn't tell who was shooting or at what. Screaming, I ran, and crawled under the panel van. I waited, my ears ringing. Another burst of gunfire rang out and then rapidly got cut off. I saw a body fall only a few feet to my right. I looked over and saw Nikolai laying there, staring blankly ahead with sightless eyes, his throat torn out. I started whimpering, trying to cover my mouth to keep any sounds from coming out. I heard soft footsteps approaching. I closed my eyes, not wanting to see my own death. Yet a moment later, I heard the shrieking of metal. I waited a few moments and opened my eyes, seeing street lights stream in. I waited with bated breath, not believing it. A few minutes later, after I still hadn't heard anything, I crawled out from under the van, checking all around me for any signs of movement. Everyone was dead. I saw Nikolai and his goons with their throats torn out. Some of the black-clad men had their hearts ripped out of their chests, the bones jutting out like razor wire around the edges of the cavernous wounds. My brother Shin had his head twisted all the way around, the skin spiraling up in a nightmarish way. I bent over and retched, my mind swimming in these disturbing visions of mutilation and gore. I looked at the entrance and saw the boy had ripped the locked door off its hinges and walked out into the tropical night. And then it struck me. I was free. I looked back at the money, laughing and dancing. I grabbed a bag of the cash, feeling just how heavy it was. I marveled at the stacks of $100 bills inside, each fresh and new, smelling like hopes and dreams. A shadow fell over me. In the doorway, I saw the boy. His clothes hung in tatters around his rapidly changing body. As I watched him, he grew taller, his arms and legs lengthening. His tanned, Middle Eastern skin lightened until it shone like bleached bones. Claws ripped their way out of his fingers and toes. His cheekbones rose into prominent bulges as his face seemed to sink in on itself. All the hair on his body fell out as his mouth opened and a sound came out, either a laugh or a shriek. I couldn't tell which, and I guessed it didn't matter anymore. The 10-foot-tall vampiric abomination stood before me, gruesome and emaciated with teeth like nails and claws like razor blades. I stepped back, terrified and pleading for my life. "Please, please, don't kill me," I said. "My wife is pregnant. She is back at the..." In a frenzy, the abomination ran forward and slashed at me. I felt an icy numbness run across my arm. Looking down in shock and horror, I saw the monster's claws had slashed through the meat, all the way down to the bone. 4 deep gouges ran through my flesh. The monster growled, shaking the floor. My life flashed before my eyes as it advanced, opening its mouth and showing far too many twisted, razor-sharp teeth. Its breath smelled like dead meat. My eyes watered. And then a man yelled something in Cambodian. A dozen other voices followed. The creature and I both turned. Dozens of police in SWAT gear sprinted into the warehouse, all pointing their guns at the creature. It hissed and spat at them, jumping onto the nearest one and biting at his face shield. I heard it crack like the snapping of bones. A moment later, the police officer's face exploded in a fountain of blood and gore as the creature's dozens of teeth ground into his head. The police opened fire on the creature. I ran towards the back of the warehouse, praying I would find another exit there and find a way out of this chaos and bloodshed. In the darkness, I saw the red lights of a fire door. I pushed my way through it and found myself in a fetid alleyway. The sound of automatic rifle fire and men screaming in agony followed me down the street as I ran. I escaped that monster, but I fear for the future. Because there's a lot more serum coming, and I know from experience that Bureau 39 will sell it to any buyer.